Guess who's back? Back again. Jessie's back. Hi, it's Jessi from Another Turning. Welcome to my channel. Today I am drinking Deep Roots Apple Crisp apple cider that I've just warmed up with some mulling spices. Because we're in fall and I love fall. And this is going to be my wrap up for the Treat-athon. But first I want to do a little bit of a life update because this is my first video out in like 2 months, I think it's been. If you don't want to see the life update, that's fine. Go ahead, skip ahead. Timestamps and chapters are in the description, so just skip to when I actually start talking about books. I've been gone for a bit. Some channel updates very quickly. Ben and I obviously haven't done stuff in a while. His life was kind of taking him in a certain direction that didn't end up happening. We were going to bring Nate in, but then Nate's life went in a weird way. We might try to still put stuff out now and then. We'll see what happens. I'm not making any official statements for the podcast at this moment. For me personally, I have several videos filmed. I even have a few edited, including like thumbnails and everything. I just haven't posted them because I'm just very burnt out right now. Not specifically YouTube, just in life. Work has been, well, to be honest, it's been hell this year. I don't know if any of you have any teacher friends, know some teachers, but this year is rough. Like, girlies, it's rough out here. And I'm not going to get into all of it, but like teacher shortages are still a thing, so everybody's kind of picking up extra slack that they wouldn't normally be doing. Everybody's putting in, really doing the work of, well, as a teacher, you're already doing the work of several people, but like even more so. And the kids are, they're struggling. The honest truth is that kids lost like 2.5 years of socialization. And that's tough on anybody. Like, most people you talk to coming out of the last 3 years are struggling in one way or another. But when you're talking about middle school age kids, they lost 2 to 3 years of socialization when, like, that was the most important time period to socialize in their life. Like, you learn a lot of skills and develop in a lot of very particular ways during that, like, 6 to 12 year range, you know? And so it's hard right now, and I'm just tired. I get home from work and I don't want to actually have to put in effort towards anything. So that's really the long and the short of why I haven't been posting. I'm tired. It's hard to cook, you know, some days, most days, let alone do something extra like this that I'm really not getting anything out of, you know? It's not like, you know? So I'm going to try to get some of those videos out, hopefully. I have, you know, my summer wrap-up is filmed, so that needs to be edited and put out, hopefully, before fall is over. I have several reading diaries, including the entirety of Dead House Gates, you know, I'd love to get out. I have a book recommendation video for Wheel of Time fans that I have a lot of other people that helped me out with, so I'd love to get that one out. So it's just, I have a lot of content, and content I'm very excited about, actually. Like, honestly, my reading diaries are some of my favorite projects, and this Wheel of Time recommendation video is one that was really exciting to do, so I'm hoping I can get those out soon. I don't know if this will post and then I won't post anything for a while again, or if this will be like the starting point and I'll start posting again regularly. I really don't know. So you'll just kind of have to keep an eye out for that. Subscribe if you're, you know, not already, so you can see when I post again, because I'm posting so irregularly, erratically even. All right, all of that aside, let's go ahead and get into the actual wrap up. So this stack of books, I'm not even going to attempt to, it's not even in frame all the way. Where are you at? You're here. They're like 5 books above that. Were all the books I was supposed to read or could have read for this readathon, plus 2 or 3 I returned to the library and 2 or 3 that were audiobooks. This is 24 books because it's a bingo board. I did not read all 24 books. The ones I actually read are the ones not even in frame. This stack plus several audiobooks. So I'm going to talk you through the ones I actually read. I'll talk you through the prompts they filled. I'm going to try to keep this short because I read 18 books. 19 books in October, 18 books, 17 books that filled prompts. And I don't want to keep you here all day, so let me move those. So for a book set at Halloween or with Halloween in the title, I read The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. I don't really have a lot of thoughts about this one. This is a children's YA, children's middle grade story of these kids that go out trick-or-treating, and one of their friends doesn't make it. Like, they go to check his house and he looks sick, and then they go on this kind of adventure through time, through the history of Halloween, to figure out how to save him, keep him from dying. It was sweet. It was interesting. It felt like being told a bedtime story, which I think was really nice. I like that audiobook experience, especially for like YA middle grade. But honestly, it didn't leave that much of an impression on me. I could see letting my kids or giving it to my kids to read one day, but like, that's it. Next, for read the next book in a series. Of course, it's going to be the one on the bottom, one of them on the bottom of the stack. I read Sandman, Volume 2, The Doll's House. This also was my trick, which is that I read it entirely at night. This is pretty good. This is the second one. So the Sandman graphic novels, which most people probably know now that the series is out that I really still need to read, is about Dream, who was in a ritual in like the 30s or something. I don't know when it takes place. The original takes place. But this guy, you know, in the height of like the like Lovecraftian era of people trying to study the occult, somebody wants to trap Death in order to live forever and accidentally gets Death's little brother Dream instead. And then the story kind of takes off with Dream escaping and trying to regain his power because he's been gone for like 100 years and needs to regain his power. This one deals with him, Dream, dealing with a vortex, which is just like a human, a mortal human that dreams kind of coalesce around. And I like this a lot more than the first volume. The one thing with this is I don't love the art style. Some panels are nice, but for the most part, it's just, I don't know. It's not an art style that really works for me. So that's part of it. I mean, and it changes art styles a lot because there's, 4 or 5 different artists involved in this. And the art style doesn't really do anything for me. And then there's a lot of text. I mean, each volume starts with like several pages of just text before it even gets into the story itself. And then there's so much text on every page. I just kind of find myself wondering why this was even a graphic novel, you know? Like, why didn't Neil Gaiman? Next one, I'm going to kind of do 2 at the same time. So read a romance and read a book with the villain's point of view. I read Desperate Measures and Learned My Lesson by Katie Roberts. So the intent was to read Desperate Measures for a book with a villain's point of view, but then I accidentally logged it as a romance, which is fine because I really wanted to go into the second one. So I read the second one, Learned My Lesson, as a book with a villain's point of view. These are erotic romance novels about Disney villains. And they're really good. I honestly think I like them more than her Neon Gods series, but I've only read Neon Gods. I haven't read anything past that, so I don't know. The first one of these, Desperate Measures, follows Jasmine and Jafar, and the premise here is that Jafar has so it's more modern day, and Jasmine's father, the Sultan, is like the lead of like a gang, I guess. And Jafar's father Jafar has just overthrown him, and he kind of takes Jasmine as his prize to kind of show off and solidify the power that he's carrying. And then the second one, Learn My Lesson, is about Hercules. So it's about Hades, Hercules, and Meg, all 3 of them. And this is kind of, Hades and Meg are kind of introduced in the first one. Hades runs this underground club where a lot of people gather. He's kind of neutral territory for all these gangs, and Meg is like his right-hand woman. But their relationship, they've been together for like 10 years, and their relationship is kind of getting to a weird place where Meg doesn't feel like Hades trusts her as much. So Hades introduces Hercules into their relationship, but also he has some ulterior motives for this. I liked both of these. I liked Learn My Lesson quite a bit more. I think I just liked the dynamic between the characters a little bit more. I liked that old romance part, so I liked that Meg and Hades already had a history. That was really cool for me. Both very, very good. I will be continuing the series at some point, but I've kind of taken a little break from romance so I could get more into the spooky, Halloween-y fall vibes for the next month, and then maybe I'll get back to it. All right, next on there, book, read A Twisted Fairy Tale. For that, and this might be stretching the prompt, you'll see that I stretched a few of the prompts to some extent or another. Let me just cover up my library sticker here. Is The Promised Neverland, Volume 1. My understanding was that this would have more like Alice in Wonderland feeling to it than it did. So that was why I put it in for this prompt, and then I just kind of stuck with it because it still has that kind of fairy tale feel. So this book is about these kids that live in an orphanage, and they think they have a really great life. They are fed very consistently, yada yada. But one of the girls, let me see how quickly things get revealed because I don't want to give too much away. Yeah, okay, that's good. It's revealed soon enough. One of the girls gets adopted, and these 3 kids are the oldest in the school, and 2 of them want to deliver. She left her favorite stuffed toy behind, so they want to take it to her. And they find out that she wasn't actually adopted, but that their mother, the head of the orphanage, actually is selling them to be eaten by demons. And so they want to escape. It was good. I think I'll continue with it when I'm in the mood. But it just didn't do a lot to hook me. Not really into the characters so much. The characters are our main girl here is just such, I know shonen is typically male-led, but she gives me shonen protagonist vibes, and it's just not quite doing it for me. But we'll see. I liked it enough, if that makes sense. Next, Dracula I read that over a double prompt weekend. This was also our Team Monster buddy read, so this one filled read a classic horror and book with an adaptation, and then I watched Dracula Dead and Loving It because I couldn't find a good recommendation. I'm not going to talk too long about Dracula. I read it last year. I think it was my favorite classic last year. It's great. I really desperately want to reread this book. I want to read this book without any knowledge of it. This is the first time I've really read a classic and been upset at how much I knew about it beforehand. And this is the second time reading it, and this didn't hit me so much last time. Last time my main thought was I wish I had read this in class so I could dissect it. This time reading it, the vibe was very much, I wish I could have read this without knowing it was about, vampires, because there is this element of what I think would be an unreliable narrator if we didn't already know what was going on. So I really liked it. I still think it's very good. I just wish I could read it without knowing what it was. Why didn't I hold that up? I have that one. It's because this is such an ugly edition. Dracula has some very ugly editions. Anyway, Dracula. Next was They Never Learn by Lainey Fargo. This was fine. This is a thriller, and the premise is that there is a professor at a school that kills boys and men, college-age kids, although sometimes professors, who have sexually assaulted girls on campus. I liked it. How much can I say without spoiling anything? There's a twist about a third of the way, half the way through, and I kind of saw it coming, but I do this thing when I'm reading stuff where I make a prediction that I think is right. I kind of erase it from my mind to be I find a way to convince myself it's not true. Never mind. I'm just going to make an analogy. So there was a twist I saw coming, but then convinced myself it wasn't true just so that I could enjoy this without knowing that twist. But it's good for the most part. There's one perspective that really bored me at the beginning, and then after the twist, I liked it a lot more, but kind of got bored with the other perspective, And I didn't like the ending. It felt very similar to when, how do I talk about this without giving the ending away? I feel like there is a theme I was expecting this to have, and the ending undermined the theme. So the theme I was expecting this to have is that what this teacher is doing, she is a monster. She is awful. What she's doing is wrong. But what's worse is that we live in a society that created this, where she felt she needed to do this, right? So the idea was that what she's doing is wrong, but somebody needs to do it. That's not the right way to phrase that. But the fact that we live in a society where these people go unpunished, where their crimes aren't recognized, is a bigger wrong than what she's doing. And I think the ending kind of undermined it, because the ending to me kind of made it come across as like what she's doing is actually right. And I don't agree with that. Big shocker, I don't agree with murder. All right, Leech. So, book set outside my country this is not on my original TBR, but I made it fit, was Leech by Kieran Ennis. I'm not sure what I'm saying. I think this book was set in France. I think. But I also think it might be set in like a post-apocalyptic future. Like, a lot of the reviews kind of mention that, and that's not a thing I picked up on, but I definitely could see it. But in the audiobook, the like native people not native, but the people living where our main character went to had French accents. So I'm going to say this takes place in France. I could have put something else. I could have done Dracula for that if I really needed to. Anyway, this is really good. This is about the Institute, is like an organization of doctors that has worked very hard to make sure they are the only medical professionals in the world. And we find out very quickly, so our main character is a member of this institute who is being sent to a remote village in, I think, rural France, the French countryside, because her predecessor has died mysteriously. And we find out very quickly that everybody from the institute is actually infected with this parasite, and they are all part of this hive mind. And the book kind of goes from there, because the big shocking thing here is that he died and the institute didn't know about it, or knew he died but didn't know what caused his death. They weren't aware during his death, which is weird. And when she gets there, she finds out that it's because there is another parasite. And it goes from there. This is a weird book. It's so weird. It's very gross. Do not read it if you don't like creepy crawlies at all. Like, I really just wouldn't recommend it. If you don't like anything that's like gross, I wouldn't read this, because this is a very gross book. Very creepy. I wouldn't say actively scary much, but it's very creepy. A lot of trigger warnings, content warnings to look into. But I loved it. There is another book that got a higher rating than this one, but I'm going back and forth on which one I liked more, and it might be Leech. Just because that one gave me much more of a visceral reaction, which is just what I really love in a book. For a book with a Grim Reaper, I read The Yellow King, The King in Yellow. The King in Yellow by Robert something. It's an older kind of fantasy short story collection, and it's split into kind of two parts. And the first half is all about, there is a play called The King in Yellow, and anybody that reads it goes insane. And it's supposedly like so good, but it shines such a clear light on humanity that it causes anybody that reads it to go insane, or tragedy will befall anybody that reads it. The second half, though, has nothing to do with that, and they're about interconnected characters, and I think they're supposed to be romances, and it just didn't do anything for me. I liked the first half. It wasn't like perfect by any means. Also recommend reading it physically, because I tried like 3 or 4 different versions of the audiobook, and all of them have terrible narrators and weird sound quality. But the first half was interesting. I really liked that kind of theme, connecting all of the stories, that there was something. But there was also some weird stuff with the world that just wasn't explored. Like the first book, content warning, mentions of unaliving. The first story had, these chambers. So like the government had outlawed suicide, but then so many people, like there was backlash against that, so the government kind of like reopened it, but you could only do it this way, and it's in these public chambers where you like are seen going in and stuff, and like Apparently that made suicide rates plummet because the only people doing it were people that really wanted to do it. Like, it was very bizarre. And so there was a lot of that kind of stuff that was just like threaded throughout that was like, I want to see that explored more. That said, the writing style didn't do it for me for most of it. So like, it's not like I'm going to read anything by this guy ever again. All right. Book with a monster in it. This is classic monster, a Frankenstein, a Dracula, that kind of thing. Or not a Dracula, a vampire, that kind of thing. I read The Book Eaters by Sunyi D. Dean. This is the one that got the highest rating for me this month and is competing with Leech for my favorite of the month. This is about book eaters, which are a species separate from humans, generally considered to be aliens. I think the book canon is they're aliens that eat books as sustenance. But there's a very strict gender split where girls are fed things like fairy tales and boys are fed things like action and adventure stories. But also there's this kind of birth defect that occurs in some members of the population. It's much more common in men than it is in in male children than it is in female children, where they don't eat books, they eat human minds. And there's a drug that's been invented that can make it so they can eat books instead of human minds, but that like hunger, that craving never really goes away. And so this book though really, I mean, it's about them, but like the premise of the blurb really makes it feel like it's about that gender dynamic, but it's really not. It's about motherhood and family. Our main character, this is told dual timeline from her as a little girl up until whatever triggers the events of the start of the book, to like, and then her on her own with her son. And they're like in exile, and she's trying to get her son, who is one of the mind eaters, that drug. But it's hard to come by, one, because she's not living with the family anymore, but then come to find out there's some other stuff going on that's making it hard to come by. This was really good. I really, really liked that exploration of family, where she has like her brother and her uncle and things like that are making her ask a lot of questions about like her loyalties and stuff like that. But also she has her son, and she has that she's trying to figure out how to take care of. And there's this split loyalty, but she also has other people that she gets introduced throughout the story that she also has loyalty to. And so there's a lot of questions of that, but also a lot of like, as a mother, where is my responsibility? When is it going too far? Am I doing the right thing by my child? Am I actually doing what's best for them, or am I just doing what feels like it's the best for them? And is it okay to be afraid of my child? And things like that are really interesting themes that are explored. But also like the reveals in this book are really good, because there's this whole mystery in the like past timeline that's like, how did she get to this point? And every time you think you have it figured out what she's doing and why, there's a little bit more introduced that makes you rethink everything. And that was really wonderfully done. Plus, highly recommend the audiobook. There is a beautiful interview at the end between the author and the narrator that just really highlighted some really beautiful stuff in the book. I really, really enjoyed this book, and I really recommend it. For a nonfiction, I read The Girl Who Drew Butterflies, How Maria Marion's Art Changed Science by Joyce Sidman. This is a nonfiction. It's kind of a children's, but also middle grade nonfiction. And actually one of my students from a couple years ago recommended to me about, let me try to find some of these illustrations, not just actual photos of bugs, some of her illustrations. But it's about Maria Marion, who is a German woman living in the early 18th century, late 18th century, who her stepfather was an artist, so she learned to be an artist, but she was always really interested in bugs, and specifically the transformation. I want one in color. I mean, like, she drew just gorgeous art. Specifically the transformation of like caterpillars into butterflies. And it just chronicles her life and her studies and the kind of research she did, even though she kind of was discouraged. I will say this book does not do, I think, the best job of showing how she was discouraged from doing that. honestly, most people are really supportive. There's like one scene where like she decides to leave her husband and her husband shows back up and is like, how dare you leave me? But other than that, this does not really do a great job. And it's not trying to do this, so I'm not like, this is not a knock against the book. But it doesn't really do much of a job displaying like the struggles she had to overcome. It's very much more about like, here's just a linear explanation of what she did. And I think it was good. I think it also, other places it maybe could be said to fail, although again, not the intent of the book. Really doesn't highlight, there's a whole section where she goes to travel to Suriname to study South American insects. And it really, I think, could have done more about how that was problematic, but it really, that's not what it was trying to do. I don't know why I'm trying to criticize this book. This is a very beautiful, very sweet book. I very much recommend it if you have a child that's interested in science or bugs or biology, even art. This is probably a really good one because it talks both about the science side of it, but also the art side of it. And I think it's really beautiful. I recommend it. Ignore the criticisms. This is for children, but I would be interested in a more in-depth, more geared towards adult biography of her. All right. But read a banned book. I didn't actually end up reading one, but that was my treat, was to get rid of that prompt. For a middle grade, I read Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga. This is about a young girl from, where is she from originally? Syria, who moves to the United States with her mother when things start kind of going rough. Like, her brother joins up with the rebels. I don't know. I'm going to be fully transparent. I don't know nearly enough about the historic background for this as I should, because I am a terrible person about me keeping up with current events. But she leaves Syria to live with her uncle and cousin in the United States. And it's just her adjusting to the United States. And it's a lot. Gosh, I'm really struggling to remember this. I knew it was really well written. Oh, that's it. So she, and it's her making friends, and it talks about like her learning English and things like that, because there's like this really interesting stuff when she first moves where, she was the best English speaker in her school back in Syria, and then she gets to the United States and she's struggling, and there's like a kind of moment of that. And so it's just a middle grade book about her adjusting to a new life. It's very similar. It's not similar, but I'm going to compare it to, what is the name of that book? I can't think of the name of the book. The one about the transgender girl I just read a couple months ago. Melissa. It's kind of similar in terms to Melissa, probably in the way that like I could compare like any contemporary for any age range, but I read so little middle grade contemporary that these are coming across similar to me as like, you're just dealing with a child dealing with the everyday struggles of being a child with this other element layered on. So it's just like her life as she adjusts to this change. Also, I listened to the audiobook. I had the physical book out from the library, but I ended up listening to the audiobook. But this is written like poems, like it's written in stanzas. And I mean, it was the narrating in the audiobook is beautiful, but I wonder how that would have changed my experience to be reading it physically and to have more of a cadence to it. Anyway, it's very beautiful. I very much recommend it, especially if there is a child in your life. It's middle grade, so I'm not going to remember it that much. Middle grade doesn't have that much impact on me anymore. I'm an adult. I'm a big kid. Okay, next, here's another one where I really stretched a prompt far beyond where I probably should have. For a book with an animal companion, I read Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. Define animal companion for me, because this woman spends a lot of time bonding with a horse and a lot of time around wolves. Sounds like animal companions for me. I'm gonna count it. This is about, what is her name? Inti, who has recently moved to Scotland with a team of conservationists who are reintroducing wolves to the Scottish Highlands. This is a controversial choice because they are well aware that this is going to be positive for the environment, right? Like, if you're not familiar with the way keystone species work, it's generally a predator in a ecosystem that has a larger impact on the ecosystem than you would anticipate. So wolves are pretty much the stereotypical explanation of this. There's a really good, not the whole thing is good because the thesis statement at the end is a little, I'm not so sure I agree with it, but there's a good TED talk about the wolves in Yellowstone that talk about keystone species and the importance of them. But wolves specifically, basically they keep the deer population down because deer are bad for forests. Most deer are more or less invasive. They kind of just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and will destroy a forest. And that has even further reaching effects. Like there's the big thing, the like kind of quote unquote stereotypical example is that like rivers changed when wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone. Anyway, that's a lot more background than you need to know. That's the point of this. But we find out Inti has Muir syndrome. I don't know if it's on here. But basically she has anytime she sees somebody or something experiencing something, she feels it if it was her. So like if she were witnessing while you hit somebody, she would feel the blow. So that's part of it that's kind of going on. She also has her sister, Aggie. They were really close. Something terrible has happened to Aggie. And we kind of find out throughout the book what that was. And then there's kind of a mystery element introduced partially through this book. Some of it really worked for me. Atmosphere-wise, this is gorgeous. It's beautifully written. I felt like I was in the forests. It was well done. The romance, could have done without. The flashbacks, I mean, you kind of know what's going to happen, and I think that's some of the intention is that the intent is that it kind of builds that dread, because you can guess pretty early what happened to Aggie, just not what specifically or how or why or when or all of that. So I think that's kind of meant to be the tension, is that you know what happened but don't know the details. But that didn't really work for me, so I was kind of bored by some of the flashbacks. I was like, okay, can we just get to the point? And the mystery just didn't do anything for me. I didn't care. And you find out who it is, and I didn't like the reveal because to me it was so out of left field that it wasn't interesting. So that part didn't do for me. But if you want an absolutely beautiful atmospheric read about the forests, then this will do it for you. Next book published in October, I read Over the Woodward Wall by A. Deborah Baker. This is cute. This is, so in Middle Game, A. Deborah Baker is kind of the original alchemist. And one of the things you find out is that a lot of portal fantasy novels are actually written about it doesn't matter. We're getting off track. Anyway, A. Deborah Baker in Middle Game wrote a book to try to encourage children to think a certain way to help her with her goals. And that was Over the Woodward Wall. This is about two kids, Zib, Hepzibah, and Avery. Zib and Avery, who are two kids that live on the same street, but they go to different schools, so they've never really interacted. They're very opposite kids. Hepzibah is wild, and she wants to play in the woods, and her parents are very free-thinking, and Avery's parents are very straight-laced, and Avery does what he's supposed to do, and he shines his shoes, and he's a straight-A student, and he's always hanging out. You know, they're very opposite kids, but they both one day on the way to school get rerouted and end up over a wall and end up in the Up and Under, which is a, typical nonsense fairy tale land. And then they have to figure out a way to get home. It's good. This is cute. I think it's in a weird thing where this is definitely middle grade. And a lot of people read this when it came out with the assumption that it was going to be like the Wayward Children series, which is somewhere over here. I'm not going to grab them. And it's not. The Wayward Children series is specifically geared towards YA and adults. Like, it's definitely, even though it's about children, it's not for children. This is for children. There are sometimes some things that kind of, I think, push that a little bit, but in a way that, like, I think if you read Narnia now, you would see it was pushing things sometimes. I don't know. I've never read Narnia. I should probably use an example I actually know. But I think or Wizard of Oz. If you read that as an adult, you're like, some of the stuff in there, you're like, I don't know if this is for kids. And so it has kind of that feel to it where you're like, sometimes you're like, ooh, should a child be reading this? But it's definitely for children. Like, I would not hesitate to put this in the hands of any one of my kids. Then again, my kids are reading Colleen Hoover, so anyway, but I would not hesitate to give this like an 8-year-old that's just getting into chapter books, you know? Is that when kids are getting into chapter books? Yeah, that's a little late, but you know, a first grader. Anyway, I think they would get a lot out of this. I thought it was fun. I thought Avery and Zeb are really interesting characters. I think the challenges they face are really interesting. I had a good time with this book. Next one, ooh, I'm almost out of space, is The Dark Harvest by I don't know who, which has pumpkin on the cover. Here's the thing very specifically. Weirdly hard prop to find, unless you're specifically looking at Halloween books, first and foremost. Secondly, I was not going to read Pumpkinheads. I have no interest in reading Rainbow Row. So this was a weird one to find a book to fit this prompt, but I finally read Dark Harvest. This is a thriller. It is, there is a ritual in this town every year where the boys through a certain age go out and try to kill the Pumpkin King or whatever he's called in order to do, I don't know. The world building and the setup of this were very poor in my mind. It took way too long for you to learn the stakes, in my opinion. So I just never really got around to caring about this book. I listened to it very passively. And honestly, in about a month or two, when I'm doing my wrap up at the end of the year, I'm not going to know what this book is about. Honestly, my main takeaway is that Strange Grace did it better. And I think that kind of already gives you probably too much about this book, but like, that was my general thought. Strange Grace did it better. Finally, actually I think in my review, either on Twitter or on Storygraph, I said something along the effects of, this is Strange Grace for white men who don't want to read about teenage girls. Anyway, and finally, for a book with reincarnation or soul in the title, I read Love Beyond Body, Space, and Time. Another stretch. There are soul-related things in this. I promise. This is a short story collection of Indigenous LGBT sci-fi stories. This is actually the first one of, what's the other one called? Love. I don't know what the other one's called. Let me see if it's on here. There's another short story collection I read last year. I think it was, I read it for, it was a Lammy nominated anthology. And do you have to read both? Do you have to read them in order? No. There is one story in particular I remember that goes with that one, but you kind of can read them in either order. I don't know if I had read this one first, if I would have liked that one any differently. They are two of my favorite stories in there. There's some other good ones. Let me see which ones I can remember, just kind of glancing at the contents. My favorite was probably Darcy Little. It's just in alphabetical order by, okay, whatever. My favorite was probably Darcy Little Badger's story, Nile, I don't know how to pronounce that, which is about a veterinarian on a spaceship to Mars. And there's lots of dogs in it, and it's very cute and yay. Anything else that really, I'm trying to think if anything stands out. The Boys Who Became Hummingbirds was a very sweet story by Daniel Heath Justice. Imposter Syndrome, I think, was one I really liked. I think this is very good. I think this is a very good anthology. I really recommend it. I recommend the other one too. I think they're very good. If you like queer sci-fi, and who doesn't like queer sci-fi? All right, and that's it. That kind of fits. That was it. This was a little bit longer than I wanted it to be. Maybe I'll cut out my rants in the beginning. Maybe. But I really did. I had a lot of fun with the Trick-or-Treat-athon. Team Monster didn't win, but whatever. I got a total 7 bingos, including the 4 corners. It's really frustrating to look at this because I was 6 books away from having a coverall. And, like, I definitely could not have finished any of these, right? Like, maybe I could have gotten To Be Taught if Fortunate in, but I really wanted to read it physically rather than reading the audiobook because I did the audiobook last time, and I wanted to read it physically, and I know that's going to take me a long time. There was one book I read that didn't end up being on the bingo board, but it's just frustrating. If I had picked, like, shorter books, like, some of these are a little bit chunky. Dracula, actually, I read Dracula in, like, 2 days because I read the audiobook really fast because I've read it before. But, like, there is an element of, like, I just picked shorter books, I could have done it. But maybe next year. Anyway, that's it. What did you guys read in October? What was your favorite book in October? Give me some spooky recs, because I'm still very in the spooky mood. Actually, give me some like thriller and mystery recs, because I've been reading horror and I'm getting more into horror, but I want to try to keep trying thrillers. I'm currently reading Confessions, and it's okay. Like I said, I read They Never Learn, and it was fine. But I think there's elements in those that I think I could enjoy. But I think what I'm struggling with is I want them to either be more of a mystery, because I want to have some sort of reveal that surprises me at the end, or I want them to be more of a horror and have something actually scary happening. And maybe thrillers just aren't for me, but we'll see. I managed to talk for a very long time after that. If you've made it to the end of the video, leave me a little jack-o'-lantern emoji or a little ghost. I love the little ghost emoji. Leave me a little ghost emoji in the comments. Like the video if you liked it. Make sure you're subscribed so you can see more from me whenever I decide to start posting again. Love y'all. Bye.